Hello, I'm back. It's been a while. I've been super busy with PhD stuff and health stuff, and life has just got in the way of YouTube, so I apologise. But I've got this snazzy new jumper on, so, you know, sweater weather has arrived. Jomsvikings. So, for the uninitiated, the Jomsvikings are a semi-mythical group of Vikings who were based on the Baltic sea coast in the late 10th and 11th centuries. They have this legendary status as a basically warrior brotherhood that some people claim is a forerunner to things like the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, and they fought in lots of battles, and they basically served either as mercenaries or they were just a load of raiders who basically did whatever they wanted. And the sheer volume of nonsense that's grown up around these people over the centuries is astounding. So let's start as normal with what we've actually got. So what we've got in terms of period stories and evidence for the Jomsvikings is almost nothing. So the story of these guys seems to arise with things like Saxo Grammaticus's Gesta Danorum. Saxo Grammaticus was a 12th century Danish theologian. He was patronised by Absalom, who was bishop of, I think, Roskilde? Editing Jimmy will correct me if I'm wrong. And he wrote the Gesta Danorum, which is effectively the history of Denmark. It's not a standard history text. It's not history as we know it today. It is completely different to the way that history books work now. Yes, it mentions source material, but it's also extremely biased. It owns up to being biased, and it's written basically for the glorification of his patron, the bishop. So it's definitely not what we would call a fully reliable, objective history book. In the Gesta Danorum, in the 10th book, which is not in public domain yet, which is really annoying because the first 9 are, you could just go on Project Gutenberg and read an English translation of the first 9 books, and that's great. The 10th book mentions that Harald Bluetooth, remember him, the 10th century king, Danish king, hence his appearance in the Gesta Danorum, conquers this town on the south coast of the Baltic Sea called Ulinum, which he then gives to this mythical Swedish prince called Styrbjorn the Strong. And yeah, we're not sure if he's real or not, but Harald gives Styrbjorn this town, and he gives him a force of men, all these hardened veteran troops, and he then terrorises the seas as a Viking raider with these people. Later on, in the 13th century, we've then got the Vinland Saga, which gives Harald as the founder of the city where the Jomsvikings live, which is called Jomsborg by this point. And then we have the Jomsviking Saga, and the Jomsviking Saga doesn't agree with that. In the Jomsviking Saga, the city of Jomsborg is founded by a mythical figure called Palnatoke. Palnatoke is the child of a man called Palnar Tokeson. Palnatoke, very original. And he is a legendary Danish hero. He's in charge of an island called Finn, and he basically has lots of adventures. There's one point where I think he's challenged by... Is it Harald Bluetooth challenges him to shoot an apple off his son's head, which is a very sort of common Germanic legendary story that appears in lots of places, and it's part of the William Tell story and all that kind of stuff. The legend then goes on to say things like Palnatoke joins Svein Forkbeard's rebellion against Harald Bluetooth. Some of the stories say that he actually killed Harald Bluetooth himself, this Palnatoke figure, and he is in charge of the Jomsvikings. Saxo Grammaticus in the 12th century also expands on the story and tells us that they have this really strict set of rules. If you want to join, you have to be brave. You must not run away from anybody the same size as you. who is armed in the same way as you, which is a very specific, fun, and definitely not made-up rule. No women are allowed in the fortress of Jomsborg, because it's a boys' club and only boys can be in the fortress for boys. You have to obey the leaders at all time. The leaders are voted, they're elected, they have an elected leadership. What else is there? There's all kinds of stuff. You have to... you can't leave the fortress for more than 3 days without the permission of the leaders. Everybody votes on new people to come in. You have to be good, you have to be brave, you have to not be a git, and you mustn't kill any of your brothers, and if there's any reason that you would kill any of these people before they joined the Jomsvikings, and then you join the Jomsvikings, once you join the Jomsvikings, you basically have to forgive and forget, and all of that kind of stuff. And there's this whole paganism tradition wrapped around it, because this is all being written by a 12th century theologian. So the basic stories in a lot of these, the sagas and the Gesta, is that these people revert to paganism. They fall off the wagon of Christianity and they become this little enclave of paganism. Then in the 12th century, we're told in the Heimskringla that Magnus I of Norway destroys Jomsborg, gets rid of the Jomsvikings in 1043, and Saxo Grammaticus tells us that Styrbjorn the Strong, that legendary Swedish prince, tries to take the crown of Sweden from Eric the Victorious in a battle where he is spectacularly defeated, and the Jomsvikings are crushed by these forces. At a battle, a real, as far as we can tell, battle, whose name I've forgotten. It's the Battle of Furisvellir in Uppsala, and it's in 984-985. They're then defeated again at another battle that I've forgotten the name of, which is the Battle of Hjörungavágr in Norway, where they're attacking Jarl Hakon in the late 980s, and they're defeated again. So there's this idea that we have of these Jomsvikings as these undefeatable, amazing, semi-magical Norse warriors, whereas most of the stories about them, in these stories that we have, are them getting their absolute arses handed to them. And there are a couple of runestones about those battles, which is interesting because they mention these battles. They're runestones commemorating people who fought in these battles, saying he didn't run away, he died in battle, which is obviously a thing for warriors in the Norse culture. You die in battle, you don't run away from the battle, otherwise you don't get to go to Valhalla. And it's interesting that these runestones are used as evidence that the Jomsvikings existed, but they're not. They don't mention Jomsborg, they don't mention Jomsvikings, they just mention these battles. So these battles happened, but saying that that's evidence is like saying, well, there's evidence that D-Day happened, therefore Superman was at D-Day. Exactly, it makes no sense. So the place where these people are meant to be based is a city called Jomsborg, and there is a potential sort of connection here to the archaeology, because the city of Wolin up in Poland has a very long history, and if you look at it, it's located on the Stettin Lagoon, and I struggle terribly with Polish pronunciation. I do apologise. I'm using Stettin, the anglicised version. I know that's not how it's pronounced in Polish. I am sorry, but I'm not great yet at Polish pronunciation, so apologies. It's got this lagoon, and according to Saxo, they had room for hundreds of ships in Jomsborg. So that's a potential place where it could have been. We're also told by an Al-Andalusian explorer, so an explorer coming from Islamic Spain called Ibrahim ibn Yaqub, who is a 10th century explorer who goes all around Europe and does a really interesting job of describing Poland and what is now Czechia and the way that all of the tribes and the Slavic tribes and their kingdoms and territories work. Describes a city which, according to him, has 12 gates, a big harbour, is on the Baltic coast, and has a huge market in it, a vast market, a vast emporium. And we're told by the sagas that Jomsborg is this huge place, this big multicultural place where lots of people live. The fortress in the city, according to Saxo, is men only the Jomsvikings live there. But if this is the same place, and it is Volin, then there should be some archaeology somewhere of this massive Viking emporium. Over the other side of Stettin Lagoon, on the German side of the border, there are the remains of these really cool Viking graves, and there may be a large Viking settlement encampment there. The archaeology is there for the burials at least, so it's really interesting to see if Jomsborg, if it existed, which we don't know it did, is actually Volin, or if it's on the other side of the lagoon, or we've got it completely wrong. But this area would have been occupied by Slavic tribes, variously the Wends or the Pomeranian tribes, whatever you want to call them. These tribes living there would have been Slavic tribes. They would have been perfectly positioned to be raided by Danish sea raiders and various other sea raiders from the northern coast of the Baltic. They'd have made a perfect target if there was this big trading city right on the coast, fairly vulnerable. If the Danes arrive, they conquer it, Harald Bluetooth gives it to somebody, it becomes Jomsborg. It kind of makes sense, but that's the evidence we've got. There are claims by people like Sven Rosborn that the Kermsen disc and all of that garbage is evidence of it, and the Gesta Vulinensis, definitely not a made-up manuscript that Sven Rosborn has hidden somewhere in his house that he won't let anybody see, but it's definitely real. I swear to God it's real. Honest, no, really, no, seriously, it's real. I just can't show it to you right now for reasons. We're not counting any of that. None of that has been seen by anybody, so as far as I'm concerned, it's fake until it's proven otherwise. Sorry, that's how academia works. That's what we've got. That's what we've got for the Jomsvikings. We've got a couple of stories of them in semi-legendary histories and sagas. We've got no real archaeology supporting their existence. We've got 2 runestones, I think, maybe 3, that reference battles that they supposedly took place in. And then that's it. That's all we got. Legends and myths surrounding these people who are either the greatest warriors who ever lived in Northern Europe or got their butts handed to them in quick succession twice by supposedly the people that formed the Jomsvikings in the first place, because they're Swedes and Danes fighting against Swedes and Danes. Doesn't really make that much sense, but yeah, they're not that great, and they last, what, 1043, so they last 80 years? So this city, this legendary mythical city of the Jomsvikings, lasts 75 years? Queen Elizabeth II lasted longer than that, you know? It's not like it's a 1,000-year-old reign of mad Viking lunatics. They were there 60, 70 years. They got their bums kicked twice in major battles, failing to take the crowns of Norway and Sweden, and then Magnus I just straight in, gone. So, yeah, nah. A lot of what's wrapped up in it is this Christian versus pagan ideology that is often misrepresented. Yes, Christians disliked the pagans severely because they weren't worshipping the right way, but by and large, your old Norse, as far as we can really tell, weren't that bothered if people worshipped different gods to them. Like, as far as they were concerned, there were plenty of gods to go around, you know. But there is this modern interpretation of, like, the Jomsvikings were fighting against Christianity, and there's absolutely nothing to support that idea. It's just people trying to make each other angry. And in this day and age, at a time like this, we need people to not be doing that. We need people to be coming together and, you know, trying to actually help each other. I mean, it's a fun story. It's a fun story. That's all we got. We've got a fun story of semi-mythical princes gifting each other semi-mythical cities and semi-mythical bands of Vikings rampaging around the Baltic. That's it. That's all we got. But it's fun. It's fun to think about. It's fun to look at these places on Google Maps and zoom in and visit them and walk around. And if it brings a bit of tourism to Volin and it gets people interested in Vikings and Viking reenactment, then proper. But yeah, that's basically it. Thank you so much. I really hope that you've enjoyed this. It's been good fun reading up on the Jomsvikings because I didn't really know very much about them and the stories. And I've now read the entirety of Ibrahim Ibn Yaqub's fragmentary commentaries on Europe. Incidentally, none of the writing that we've got that's by Ibn Yaqub is actually his writing. None of his original survives. All we have are fragments of people writing them down later on. But it is a really fascinating text. I'll link to it in the description. Thank you so much to everybody who's still helping, supporting, contributing to the Patreon, joining the Discord. It's absolutely wonderful, getting lots of lovely messages telling me to keep going with the PhD. So I'm keeping going with the PhD, I'm trying my best, and I will see you in the next video. So diolch yn fawr iawn am ymuno. Thank you very much for joining me once again, and until next time, tan y tro nesa, hwyl am y tro. Bye for now. That's what that means in Welsh. Dig it.